Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Especially while saying fuck and shit to let everybody know that you've got that earthy kind of
I like to think
tell
of
it
myself
straight
as sort of
attitude.
like a blue Jimmy Stewart. That's how I think I come off. Wow, she was giving me a Hummer, like that kind of thing.
That's an old Dana Carvey
That is an
bit.
old
Have
Dana
you ever
Carvey
seen
joke,
that?
yeah.
Yeah. He was talking about Jimmy Stewart getting a blowjob. Whoa! Well, it's a pleasurable sensation.
Seems like a thing they just didn't do back then. Like, I know it's not true, but they just never talked about it.
They just never talked about it. That's the like when I got into stand up, I kept hearing good things about Richard Pryor, and finally listened to a Richard Pryor album, and the first 10 minutes was about masturbation, and I was like, I have heard so many awful I have heard more awful masturbation jokes than is permitted by the Geneva Convention by virtue of doing stand-up comedy. So I was really let down, and it later occurred to me he was doing that comedy at a point in time where probably no one had ever talked about it openly, and half the audience had never said it out loud, had never talked to another human being about it. Half the audience just assumed that they were perverts and that they would go to jail, and so yeah, I think it was just a lot more uptight. That's the era where Dick Van Dyke and his wife would have to either sleep in separate beds, or the rule was that they could be in the same bed, but one of them had to have their feet on the floor the entire time. Like, they could not be shown in the same bed horizontal at the same time, even if they were just talking.
Because it would be too erotic for the American public.
To see Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore horizontal reading magazines in bed. Ooh,
exactly.
Too much.
With a nightcap on.
I mean, it was such a pure time that men would go by the name Dick and no one would think anything of it.
Yeah, there was no adultery, and prostitution didn't exist. There definitely wasn't any wife swapping. It was very wholesome back then.
Speaking of prostitutes, so when we were in Chicago for the DNC, Heaton and I ran into Ben Dreyfuss, who's a very talented writer. He's got a good Substack. He, over the weekend, did a little investigation into the claim, because it became national news, on whether or not Arnold Palmer had a big dick. This became a big deal in the political world because Donald Trump made reference to other golfers coming out of the shower after showering with Arnold Palmer and saying, "My God." And the in-depth investigation that Mr. Dreyfuss did was the biography of an old Vegas whore. Who apparently was directed maliciously to sleep with Arnold Palmer all night to degrade his golf ability by rival golfer Sam Snead in exchange for a mink coat. And in her description of Arnold Palmer as a lover, she does not mention his dick size. Dreyfuss points out that when she then later in her biography talks about an orgy she has with Frank Sinatra, she says when she first laid eyes on his dick, she told Frank, "What do you want me to do with that thing? Throw it over my shoulder and burp it." Frank then responds, "I'll show you what I want you to do with it." And then Dreyfuss, the next line coming out of the block quote just says, "Anal. Anal is what he wanted to do with it."
Wow.
So apparently go check out his Substack. But I think that's pretty much the meat of it.
He's a funny guy.
Very funny guy.
Justin and I hung out with Ben Dreyfuss like night 4 or whatever.
No, the only night I was there, it was night 1.
Was it night 1? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
There was some party that we got invited to. Jen, you were invited. You were invited. Don't give me that look. You decided to stay in. You decided to stay in the hotel. We could look it up on text. I didn't know Ben Dreyfuss was going to be there. It was like, hey, I got invited to some event. And you were like, nah. And then Ben Dreyfuss wound up being there and got schnockered and told us stories about the 80s and things.
Yeah.
That's fun.
It was a moment. I walked in and there was somebody that Heaton would consider to be his only rival in media, his only beef, his only feud in media. And I walk in to see, because Heaton is sober this year, a sober Heaton and a visibly inebriated person for whom he is currently in his own self-described media feud with. And Heaton just looks up at me and says, "It's fine. We buried the hatchet."
Yeah, we buried the hatchet, yeah. Yeah, I actually I was going to come in and talk to the guy because I saw him and I was like, there's no reason for this to be a thing. So I was going to come up and be like, hey, congratulations on something that happened recently. And like before I could even open my mouth,
can we not say his name now?
No, I don't think so. Because then it's going to make him look bad now when we're not having the thing, right? But before I could open my mouth, he turned around and he goes, "I owe you an apology." And it was very, very apologetic. And yeah, we're fine. Everything's great. Everything's great. The world's great. We got
now he sounds magnanimous. Gosh, this is just going to annoy the listener so much.
I know, this like inside goss. Like I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I'm sure I did once upon a time, but my memory is garbage.
We got drunk with. Well, I didn't get drunk. Neither did Justin. Really, we watched Ben Dreyfuss get drunk on a couch.
I drank. Yeah, and Ben Dreyfuss. I'll tell you what, that dude, he goes hard. He goes hard, and he is a great. He is what I would consider a classic media gadfly bon vivant. Like he is from the old mold.
Drink number X was like, so how did everybody lose their virginity? Like trying to rattle us? And so I just made up a story involving a threesome. Could you tell I was making that up, Justin? You've known me a while. I assume you could tell that was nonsense.
No. Well, with you also, I never.
It was totally real then.
Yeah, with you, I never really know because you also just have weird.
You have the weirdest stories.
Yeah, you have odd stories that pop in. I told my real story of how I lost my virginity, which is a fun one.
I won't even go into the technical stuff. I had to open the door. Incidentally, I learned alpacas think dogs are wolves, and Wallace thinks alpacas are very interesting and wants to bark at them. So he has to be on a leash while he's here at the alpaca farm.
Yeah.
How has your journey been thus far, Sweet Heats?
It's been nice. I stayed at an orchard the first evening, which was, I wish I could have been there longer, actually. Everybody I've talked to has been super cool, but I had to get on the road. I've been here 2 nights, and I'm leaving directly after we talk here at the alpaca farm in Virginia, which is beautiful. And on top of that, had a good bonding moment with Tom, who runs it. Because I called him and went, hey, like, can I see the alpacas? Can we do like a tour or something? And he's like, yeah. So we hung out, and I got really into alpaca farming questions where I'm like, well, so how many acres do you need per alpaca? And he's like, well, people will tell you 10. And I'm like, I believe it, but it's functionally 5. And I'm like, good to know.
5 acres per alpaca sounds excessive.
Hold on. I think it was maybe 5 for 5. I don't remember. It wasn't a lot of land actually for alpaca. You could get by on a pretty small.
I think
amount.
that's part of the allure of an alpaca is that it almost borders on like McMansion lawn that you can actually have a few alpacas on it.
You need to have a minimum of 3 because they're social animals and they have to have a hierarchy. It's best to have 5 or more. But you have to keep the males and females separate because if you have more than one male, the males just fight each other for the harem, so you have to separate them. Also, not a big profit margin. This is something that I find every time I talk to farmers. One, all farmers today effectively have a PhD in agronomy. Like every farmer that's operating today in the 21st century is the equivalent of a PhD in agriculture. The amount of technical scrutiny that they have under their command is insane, and the profit margin appears to be like $30 a year. Every time I talk to a farmer, I do not get the impression they're rolling in dough.
Well, now do you feel bad about how much you yell about farm subsidies?
Not a bit at all. At what point?
Do you tell that to their face, you coward?
We didn't get into the nitty gritty of the farm bill, but we did get into federally provided crop insurance, and I had some thoughts on that. Hoo boy! So in the particular place that I'm at right now, I'm not going to out them. There was a new rule that you could get subsidized federal crop insurance if your farm is majority owned by a woman. So what happened in the current farm that I'm staying at? It was previously 50-50. And they just shifted it to where it's now 51% the wife, 49% the dude, and now they get the federal subsidies. And I was like, that sounds about right, and I don't think it's good. Although it doesn't sound like the crop insurance is actually that much, to the point where I wonder what the administrative hurdle is like to even exercise the system. I don't know. I'm looking forward to the farm bill so I can trash it.
All right.
I'm glad to see that you've had such an enriching trip, Heaton.
Yes.
Yeah, and for the record, I think most of the farmers would agree with me because I think most of the money's not going to small town farmers. I think it's going to big landowners that live
Big
in
ag.
and shit.
Yeah,
So I don't think the farmers are actually going to disagree with me that much. Maybe
You should unite them. You should be like a mayonnaise Cesar Chavez. Just uniting the men of the land.
Yeah. I like that. Maybe I could do that.
From an alpaca farm in Virginia.
I'm Andrew Heaton.
From Austin, Texas.
I'm Jen Briney.
And I'm Justin Robert Young, also in Austin. We're Not Wrong is the name of the program. On this edition, we're going to talk about Donald Trump going on Joe Rogan and whether or not it is an actual watershed moment or just another podcast with a male-dominated audience for Trump, and if Kamala Harris should have done it or is doing it. There's rumors this morning that she might. And then whether or not doom scrolling is killing us, as well as your emails. But we've hit a milestone in this bit. This bit that has now opened, I think, 3 consecutive shows about people buying Southwest stock. And here's the line. The line is, we're getting so many emails about this, I can't include all of them, or else it would take up too much of the show. And I think we have already made the point. So I will continue to run 5 per show. Every 5 new Southwest shareholders that write in, probably first come, first serve, will get into the show, but we'll start here. Decided to check on my portfolio earlier this week, and lo and behold, I had just enough payouts from dividends to cover a few shares of Southwest. My husband Peter and I were sitting at dinner tonight admiring his 2-year-old politics t-shirt, talking about how good of a quality it is and discussing how he wants another one for Christmas, when we suddenly realized that we forgot to tell you we're now proud members of the Love Squad. Happy Monday. Just purchased
Love it.
Yep. Because, again, the stock ticker is LUV. LUV is the stock ticker. Just purchased 126 stocks of Southwest, which I believe makes me the managing partner of the We're Not Wrong collective, quite possibly. Many people pointed out to us that this week, Elliott Management, who is leading this hostile takeover of the Southwest board, launched their own podcast called Stronger Southwest to push their talking points, which means either we can just put your podcast into the middle of our show if you give us money and favors, Elliott Management, or we are in a blood feud with you and we will seek to review bomb and ruin you in the world of podcasting if you do not bend to our will. If only there was a brave leader that hated Elliott Management who could, bother to buy a share of the stock. Maybe that's the kind of spark we would need to do that.
Jen is right. Elliott Management and all of the activist stockholders are horrible. The existing regime within Southwest Airlines is doing a great job. Let's all just stick with a plan. No reason to change a horse mid-race. Elliott Management could go the way of the dodo.
Because of my faith in Elliott Management to direct Southwest business in a prudent direction, this podcast's ability to evangelize the good news of Southwest's ascent, I decided to invest in 22 shares of Southwest stock. We're going to the moon, and I'm taking my 2 free bags. And finally, I'm going to buy some Southwest stock. But you better believe that if Congress holds up a hearing asking for testimony about stock collusion once it skyrockets like GameStop, I'm throwing jury under the bus immediately. Well, I do have to say that I do like the stock, which is why this morning I bought 2 shares of Southwest stock. I loaded up the Robinhood app on my phone. I put money into the app and I bought 2 shares. I did it all while making breakfast for my young family. It took about 10 minutes.
Why?
Jen?
Why? I get that you guys are having like a ball with this, but like, it's not just the emails coming into We're Not Wrong, by the way. I have people now sending me messages via Twitter and Instagram and my email telling me you got stock, and like, like I said last week, I don't really get the joke, but I actually think one of these emailers have put the finger on why, like, I'm getting to the point of being annoyed by it. Because this whole thing started because I love Southwest.
Yes.
There's not a lot of companies that I love. And Elliott Management, these economic parasites, are going in there and despite doing no work for this company and in no way like having, like they're not employees of it. They don't make the company great. They just think that they deserve to extract profits from it. And they're going to go in there and they're going to change it. They're going to shitify this company that I love. And I decided to tell this audience that. And you guys are rewarding this by buying like over $3,500 worth of their stock, $600. Like this is now thousands of dollars that you're using your market power to tell Elliott Investment that you support what they do.
No,
like,
we're not. We're not. No, we can at this meeting that they are calling lead a recalcitrant stymieing of their efforts.
Not
we just
one
need a
emailer
leader.
has said that they're going to do that. Not one emailer said that that's the reason.
Yes. No, trust me. That is the point of this. That is the point.
I thought
This is, but we want you to get off that. We want you to get off the sidelines. That's the thing. Right now, you have talked a very, very fiery game. You have inspired everybody who has written in to put their own money where their mouth is. They are waiting for their leader to step off the sidelines and join the battle.
Bullshit. Because of my faith in Elliott Management,
but that's the troll to the initial thing. Obviously, any bit that goes long enough, there's going to be somebody that does the bit that is on the opposite side of it. But that's the exception that proves the rule.
It just seems to me like we have a shitload of people that are purchasing stock in here, and it just feels like to troll me. I don't really feel the vibe of like
buy one share of the stock.
But why? I don't see.
So we can go to this proxy battle and we can fight for what's right, for what you have inspired people to stand up for.
Do you actually think that these people,
Yes.
this is why they're buying these stocks?
You want to know what? Don't believe me. Don't believe me.
I don't.
Listeners, if that is why you bought the stock, please write in. And we'll see next week.
Truly, not being funny for a moment, I don't think people are doing it to make you feel bad. I think they're doing it because it's silly and fun. And it's just this, we have our own little GameStop stock that we're doing as an inside club. And I think it's great. And I compliment everybody that's getting in on the silliness.
But here's why GameStop and this were different. Like GameStop was a great little company. It's where you would go to buy, like I would buy my Nintendo games there, and we picked that stock during COVID because first of all, we were fucking bored, but it was a company that people actually liked and wanted to survive.
Well, they were shorting it. That was the big deal. Is that there were hedge funds that were shorting it, and so they were looking to fuck.
They were looking to fuck that. Yeah, exactly. And it's like by buying the stock right now after Elliott's making these announcements and the way that they want to change Southwest, it seems to me that all these people are siding with the parasites.
No. Trust me. I'm reading the emails. Please. Not a joke, not a bit. I'm reading the emails. They are on your side. They want you to buy one share, so they are trying to encourage you to learn how to start a Robinhood account and buy one share. That is what this is about. That is the entire point of this. They are not bolstering Elliott Management. Anybody who says that they are doing it because so far, people saying, we are all jumping in the water, Jen, please jump in with us, has not worked. And so now there is somebody who is being antagonistic to see whether or not that will prod you off the sideline.
So these people actually intend to vote. They intend to go to the meeting. Like, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. If we're just in this for the yucks, like I don't.
Will come to the meeting. If we go to the meeting,
yes,
there's going to be people that want to go to the meeting with us, and it'll be super fun. It won't be everybody, but I guarantee you there will be people that want to come to the meeting.
I'll believe it when I hear it. But all I'm hearing today is support for Elliott.
Next week, all right? If I'm lying, I'm flying.
Especially this person that purchased 120, like that's a lot of stock.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart.
What do you mean it breaks your heart?
Because it sounds like they're siding with Elliott.
They are not. Jen, I swear to God, this is not about siding with Elliott Management. This is not about saying fuck Jen. This is about saying, Jen, please join us. We are having a really good time doing this, and we want to fight for what is right for Southwest because I think there's a lot of people in this audience, me and you included, that very much rely on Southwest and care about it.
I thought Elliott Management was the one that was trying to stop the existing regime from the stuff they're planning to do that Jen doesn't like.
No,
This started because they were going to change the pre-boarding and stuff. Is Elliott Management precipitating that, or is
Elliott Management has pushed to do it? So they wrote like a manifesto of things that they would want to change, and so the current regime, looking to stave off a more hostile board takeover, has said that they want to do X, Y, and Z, or they're exploring X, Y, and Z. And so that's what made news. That is what brought us to this moment. And we can fight against it. We can. And I mean, people, look, at the end of the day, we've been on the internet long enough to know that you don't actually tell the internet what to do. The internet just does what it wants, and we can either be a part of it or we cannot. But ever since we have said people are buying one share of Southwest, very rarely do you hit a gusher like this, because again, we've hit the line where I can't include all the emails anymore. So there we go. All right. Former President Donald Trump is scheduled to record an interview with Joe Rogan this Friday on the Joe Rogan Experience. The taping will take place at Rogan's studio in Austin, Texas. Of course, Rogan's podcast has 17.5 million YouTube subscribers and over 14 million Spotify followers, providing Trump a platform that appeals to Rogan's demographic. Trump has previously appeared on several influential podcasts, including Bussin' with the Boys and Patrick Bet-David's show. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris has also targeted podcast audience, including Call Her Daddy, which has a large female listenership and viewership. Despite expressing mixed opinions on Trump, Rogan has acknowledged his successful presidency in certain areas while criticizing him in others. Rogan's show is known for its diverse guests and controversial conversations which challenge mainstream perspectives. Meanwhile, Harris, who is reportedly in negotiations with Rogan, announced that she will appear on the Brené Brown podcast. She is a Texas-based therapist who had a very, very successful TED Talk and has a large female demographic. And then I saw on the Austin Reddit this morning that, according to somebody talking at the mothership last night, Harris will do the show this weekend, but that is just some stuff that people said on Reddit. So take that, obviously, with a grain of salt. The Trump news is confirmed, at least by multiple different outlets. Jen, is this the first podcast that will materially matter to the results of an election?
I mean, out of all these appearances between Trump and Harris on podcasts, this is the first one I'm going to listen the second it drops.
I think that it has every opportunity to be the most downloaded podcast of all time.
I think so too. And it's, it's funny because I remember going back to 2020 and 2016. This is exactly what I wanted. I wanted the candidates to sit down with Joe Rogan in particular because he doesn't take any bullshit, I'm surprised he's doing this because he has said for years that Trump has wanted to come on his show and he's just continued to say no. So I would be very surprised if he has Trump and not Harris. Although I could see Harris being big enough of a pussy to where if it doesn't go well for Trump, that she wouldn't want that kind of heat because he's very nice, but he will also
he'll be persistent. And here's the other thing is that I don't know a whole lot. I'm not a regular Rogan listener.
I am.
So you are. How many episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience are 30 minutes long?
0.
Because that's the outer limit of what Kamala Harris does interviews for.
Yeah.
She does not do long form interviews. Even her on stage stuff very rarely lasts beyond a half hour when she's not the only one speaking. So
yeah, it's really hard to be a robot on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Yeah.
It's 3 hours. It's a conversation and it's going to look pretty bad if you stand up and leave in the middle. Now, that said, when Bernie did Rogan's podcast, he said that he had some kind of time restraint. So that was actually pretty short. That one was only about an hour, which I found really disappointing. I think Bernie would have done himself a lot of favors if he did the full 3. But so I'm curious to see how long it's going to be. But
I think
I'm excited to hear it.
The Trump Rogan one might still be going by election day because
we'll see.
They like to talk, the two of them.
Yeah, but you know how Trump gets when he gets any kind of pushback. He gets real pissed off. And I feel like if Joe does a good job with this, I don't think it's going to be the fluff that Trump thinks it's going to be.
I mean,
we'll see. I'm curious to see how Joe behaves. I mean, it's such a big moment, and I think I would be nervous if I got this opportunity. So I don't know how much he's going to push back, but like Trump says some really crazy shit. And so I just don't, knowing Joe Rogan the way I do, I don't see him just like letting it all fly.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there'll certainly be a pushback. I mean, at least based on what we have seen from Trump's media appearances and his podcasting appearances so far, there have not seemed to be hard time limits on things. Mm-hmm. And you have not seen the same kind of like handler jump in, cut this, like, let's move on.
But he's also picked like dude bro podcasts where,
I mean, he's done he's done CNN, he's done NBC. Like, it's not like him getting hard questions.
This is different.
Oh, 100% it is.
And that's why I'm excited about it, because it's an actual conversation as opposed to these mainstream media interviews. But like I watched a little bit, just like on Instagram. I didn't actually download it, but he went on Andrew Schultz's podcast, and like they were just yucking it up. Like, it really wasn't a conversation about how are you going to run the country. I think Joe Rogan is going to have the what would you do as president conversation. At least I hope he will. I don't think this is going to be.
I don't know, man. This is the thing about Trump is like, and I could see from what I know of Joe Rogan, if Trump starts spinning tales of stuff that happened in the 80s that Rogan's really interested in,
he could derail
it's just gonna go wherever it's gonna go.
Yeah.
Heaton, do you believe that this podcast could matter? Capital M, matter.
Yeah, I do. I think so. It's a giant podcast. It's a giant audience. And if some of those are undecided voters in swing states, yes, it could make a difference. And the other reason that I think it will make a difference is that Trump is entering a format which I think will be beneficial to him, in that Trump just has to not be crazy for 2 hours. And I think he's probably very capable of sounding sane and rational and well-meaning and level-headed when he's talking to one person over a 2-hour period. I think he can calibrate himself to that. So I think that this will be beneficial to him. I hope for that reason that Kamala Harris does the exact same thing immediately following it, given how big of a mouthpiece this is. But with Trump in particular, I think that Trump, I think, truly believes whatever he says, and that makes him a very captivating speaker, and it kind of messes with your head, because there have been several times where I'll watch him and I'll go, he seems to really truly mean this. But then I'll go, wait a minute, this is like falsifiable. This thing that he's saying is directly falsifiable. I think the world just reorients around whatever he says in his mind. And for that reason, it makes him very captivating, and it makes him very compelling, because he's not lying to you. He believes what he's saying. It's just that he can manufacture whatever he believes on a regular basis. And if you're not already prepared for that and you're listening, then it sounds like he's studious and level-headed and earnest. And I think he becomes a clownish figure in so much media. That's part of the charm of Trump, is that he's not a robot. He is very saying what he thinks. He is very real and gritty and flamboyant. And so for people that are worried that this guy's nuts and are we going to give him the nuclear codes, having him sit down in a format where he's able to talk to somebody one-on-one for a couple hours, I think will actually be of great benefit to him. So I think that this will most likely be a meaningful bump to Trump, not in terms of like poll numbers shooting up 3%, but we're not dealing with an election where poll numbers are shooting up 3%. We're dealing with, 300,000 votes in 7 swing states? So, yeah.
We'll see,
If like 300 people decide to vote for him in those crucial areas, that's not nothing. Like I do think it'll be a thing, and I think it'll probably benefit him.
Oh, I don't know. I think there's some real good chances that this could be a giant mistake on Trump's part. It's going to depend on how it goes, but I could see a scenario in which young people who are thinking about voting for him, he has a sit down with Joe Rogan and goes real crazy pants and can't really answer for himself. Like if Joe Rogan says, "Did you lose the 2020 election?" That conversation could get real awkward, and I could see people deciding not to vote based on it. So I think it can go either way. That's why it's exciting to listen to.
Yeah, true. Fair enough. That's a very good point. And like, as we saw in the debate, like I think you can derail Trump if you just do anything that sort of pricks narcissism. So if he starts doing things of like, but people don't find your rallies that fun, like whatever the thing is, it could completely derail. I would love for him to talk to Trump about that specifically. I think I appreciate getting into the economic arguments and trade wars and shit like that. I am an aberration in that regard. I don't think most people are thinking about that. And the kind of big glaring thing that happened over the last 5 years is January 6th and the lead up to it.
But here's the thing. And this is why I think if Kamala does it, it's way more of a liability than Trump. Because as bad as that answer can go, throw it in the pile with dozens of other times where he's answered that question that has not been up to the specifications of certain people, right? It's not like he's never faced that question before. He's faced that question before on live national television during debates, like he did twice during the two debates that he did. One that people thought he won, one that people thought he lost. Now, is he ever going to give an answer that's going to satisfy some people? No, he's never going to do it. But he's got practice in doing it. Kamala has faced one adversarial interview in her career, let alone this campaign. And it was Brett Baer. And that was a situation where it was a very short porch. He had 20 minutes of time to do the interview before
journalist that is Brett Baer.
Before they had to turn it around live because they had advertised that this was going to be run as live. So that doesn't just happen. They have to like run it through whatever the satellites are to get it out. And in that scenario, Harris could and did try to kind of filibuster through answers. If she doesn't want to answer about when she knew Joe Biden was on the mental decline, she can just say Donald Trump a bunch of times and just she knows that there's a finite amount of time.
Yeah.
With Rogan, he's just going to keep coming back to it. And it's going to sink in and get a lot more awkward than it did with Brett Baer, who kept trying to interrupt because he knew that he wanted to get more questions in instead of have it just be about this one thing. With Rogan, he is under no specifications to do that. He could sink in and let that be the only thing that gets talked about for as long as she is on the show. I don't know.
But Brett Baer was on a mission. He's a Fox News guy. He was on a mission to make it adversarial. That is not Joe's thing. He wants people to feel comfortable and get to know them. So it is a different situation. I do think he will be kind to both Trump and Kamala. I think he does a lot of follow-ups, which is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. I don't see either of these as being adversarial, but the way that
he's going to ask questions that she has not been asked from anybody but Brett Baer.
For sure. And I'm not denying that at all, but just the way that he does it, like when he has gotten people, because I don't think he goes out to like do the gotcha, right? No. But the way that it happens is he just gives people the rope to hang themselves. And I do think that could be a problem for Kamala, especially if they bring up Gaza. Her answers have just gotten worse and worse and worse. And so that is one area where, like, honestly, I want to have someone in a conversational setting find out what this woman actually thinks, because I think it's a big deal.
I mean, that's the big thing about that Brett Baer interview, which, look, I think Brett Baer had an opportunity to ask her questions that nobody had asked her before, and likely nobody might ask her until the election.
Yeah.
And he tried to get as many of those kinds of questions in as he could. I don't blame him. That's a hard situation to operate in. Harris apparently showed up late, and then they tried to end the interview early, and you could see that in him, like, you know, getting the cut sign from the aides over the shoulder. But the Rogan thing would be materially different.
Yeah.
And you know.
And I don't know if either of these boomers get it. Like, I don't know.
I think Trump has been doing media, long form, short form, all of it, since the 80s. Anywhere that would allow him access to a microphone,
yeah, that's true.
He has done it. I could see that interview being an hour and a half of them just talking about UFC venues and, you know, the laws that, you know, John McCain calling it human cockfighting for an hour and a half. Like, 'cause that's the other thing. We have to imagine that they've had conversations before. They've had more. Joe Rogan has probably had more social conversations with Donald Trump than
I don't know that they've ever met.
They shake hands whenever Trump goes to UFC events. And
yeah.
he's a UFC announcer, right? Rogan?
Yeah, he's the announcer. I don't know if they've sat down and like.
I would imagine that
Just the way Joe talks about him, it doesn't sound like he knows the man.
I would assume that even if the social words exchanged are 12 and they're all hi, hello.
I've met Donald Trump. So if I've met Donald Trump, Joe Rogan has definitely met Donald Trump.
Yeah, I don't doubt that they've met, but I don't think that they've had a conversation like this before.
No, I don't.
Like that? No.
Like this.
I don't know though.
Or even
they're both like super tight with Dana White and like.
I feel like Joe would have told us if he knew Donald Trump in any capacity. I feel like he would have talked about it before. Because all he's really said about Trump personally is just like, I don't want to have him on the show. He's asked to be on the show. I've said no. Like that's what he says over and over and over again. So to have this news not only drop this week, but like it's happening Friday.
Yep. In the last 2 weeks of the election.
Yeah. I mean, people have already voted and now this is happening. So it's wild. I can't wait to hear it. It could go any way.
Something else that I think he'll do, Justin, I think you're right. Like Trump is extremely media savvy. As someone who is not a Trump fan, he's a media genius. He's very, very good at media manipulation. It's one of the reasons why when people throw things at him, he's able to use it as a propulsive element in his political ambitions and what would normally ruin somebody else. And I think he will go in. I hope, Jen, that you're absolutely right, and you might well be, that it just a 2-hour interview, half of it is just on January 6th, which would be great. I would love it if it turned into a referendum on that, where that became first and foremost, because I almost feel like people have gone, yeah, but that was 4 years ago. I don't want to talk about it at this point, and I do think it's that and the Eastman memo are a really big deal. I suspect what he will do is shotgun bits of policy and ideas all over the place. Like having watched Trump, having watched his surrogates for the last 4 years, Trump will just he'll say so many different things on a topic that you can kind of pick what you want it to be. Where you can, like, I this week I'm having on the political orphanage. I'm having on people to make a pitch for Donald Trump. I'm having on people to make a pitch for Kamala Harris. And the guy making a pitch for Trump at one point says, Trump has said he would drop all trade tariffs tomorrow if the other country would do it. Like he's deep down he's a pro-trade guy, and I'm like, I think he said 40 different things, and 38 of them militate the other way, but 2 of them militate that way. But it creates this kind of structure where you can go, oh, I think this is what his foreign policy is. I think this is what his thing. So I think that he will use it as an opportunity to scattershot ideas that give people plausible latitude on whatever they want him to be. I also, with bated breath, await that interview.
Having listened to Rogan for as long as I have, I do want to put a little damper on your hopes that this is going to be some like referendum
I was gonna say,
on the January 6th thing. That's not going to happen because Joe Rogan has shown no understanding whatsoever of the greater plot. I mean, he's at the point where it's like, the riot, because that's all anyone's ever focused on. So I'm sure he's aware of the riot, but the Eastman memo, I honestly doubt he knows what that is. So what I expect more from Rogan is for the topics to kind of go all over the place. I could see them broing out on stuff like, censorships, free speech. Like he's been talking about this kind of stuff a lot, and he has been sounding more like he's leaning in the Trumpian direction, especially now that his friends...
Certainly his the ecosystem that has sprung up around the Rogan podcast, Schultz included, Theo Vaughn included.
But like the political people that he talks to the most, like Tulsi Gabbard is now on Team Trump. She's now officially a Republican. Like RFK, like that's who Joe was kind of leaning towards before, is now on the Trump team. So I think it's going to be a more friendly interview than not. Where I could see this going wrong is just Trump being Trump and going off the rails, and then Joe just following up with reasonable questions that Trump doesn't know what to do with. That's what I'm excited. There's a big question mark on how this is going to go, and this I think is the first time in this election where I see any kind of question mark whatsoever, and I think that's what I'm excited about.
I would agree with you, and I would say that it's a 75% chance that this is just a Joe Rogan and Donald Trump having a good conversation. I will say this, in terms of long form podcasts, and I would say more specifically with JD Vance than with Trump, because Trump is kind of a baked final kind of figure for people. But, JD Vance did Theo Vaughn this week and came off like a funny, down-to-earth guy. Like, compared to where the Democrats had very, very effectively defined him as this neo-reactionary, Handmaid's Tale level, pro-life person that is a sexual degenerate. Like, him doing long-form podcasts has done the most to humanize him in the eyes of, we'll see exactly how many votes that turns into. But I would see, I don't know. My guess is, and I don't listen to Joe Rogan podcasts except for when there's a gigantic guest that I really want to pay attention to, usually Kanye. And I could very much see them spending more time talking about, the Gracies than January 6th.
Yeah, but this is happening 2 weeks before the election. I don't think Joe's going to let it go completely into the fluff realm. Like, he knows why people are tuning in. And at the end of the day, Joe Rogan is running a business. Like, JRE is an enormous business. Yep. It's an enormous business for Spotify. He's getting $100 million every 3 years for this damn thing. So I don't think that he's going to just yuck it up with him about topics that have nothing to do with politics. I do think that there's going to be...
they'll talk about politics.
Yeah,
but like you said...
I want to give Joe some credit real quick. That guy's a true independent man. Like, if I am not mistaken, he endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2016 and then voted Joe Jorgensen in 2020. And that, there's a lot of latitude between those two positions, between Bernie Sanders, the Libertarian candidate. And so I don't know how he's going to land at any given time. And I appreciate that. I do like legitimate, true independents. Most independents are really Republicans or Democrats under duress, who are reliably going to vote that way, but they're pissed off that the party's not doing what they want it to do. And that's about 80%, I think, of independents.
Yeah.
But the 20% that truly is up in the air from election to election, I love those people, because I genuinely want to know, like, what is your personal stratagem? What is the thing that's making you do this? Because we don't know in advance how you're going to act.
Yeah. I'm just excited for us as a country that this is happening. I'm hoping that Joe Rogan does a good job and doesn't actually freak out the candidates that much, because how many of us have been sick of the sound bites? How many of us are sick of these
I was
managed...
born in a middle-class family, and...
Yeah, exactly. Like, all we get are these 60-second clips. We have these incredibly managed debates. This is actually what we need. And just selfishly, the legitimization of our medium is also very exciting to me. So I think there's a lot of good that can come out of this if Joe is able to do this professionally and be friendly. And of course, there's going to be people that shit on him, but he knows that's coming. I'm excited for this for a lot of different reasons. Yeah. I think it's a step into the future
let's hope that is exactly what happens. I would love that. Having worked in television and having worked in podcasting, you can actually let a conversation breathe. You have so much more latitude to get into nuance. When I was working as a primetime television writer, even on a show where we were actively trying, we had meetings of, let's bring on the smartest people we disagree with, because we want to give viewers the best possible arguments available to them. We don't want straw men. Let's find the smartest people we can that makes us uncomfortable. We were actively trying to do that. And even then, for a topic like the Middle East, we had 8 minutes that we were splitting between 3 hosts and a guest. That's an average of 2 minutes per person for how you would fix the Middle East. And it lends itself, you can put the smartest people in television imaginable, and you're still going to get bumper stickers, you're still going to get slogans, you're still going to get sound bites, because that's the nature of the medium. With podcasts, you don't do that. I think podcasts are deeply humanizing, and I think that they allow you to actually explore ideas, and you can stop and go, hey, wait, hold on a minute. I want to make sure I understand where you're coming from, or I want to understand what you're saying, and actually let the thing breathe, which would be great. I would love it if people were able to hear long-form conversations with candidates as opposed to seeing meticulously curated sound bites that were generated by lizard people with clipboards based on polling.
For sure. I mean, Kamala Harris, when it comes to Gaza, we were at the DNC. Mm-hmm. She has been repeating that line that she gave on the stage at the DNC, word for word, when she's asked about the topic. That's how managed it is. And I feel like in a long form interview, you just can't get away with like having those 2 sentences and then that's it. Like she would have to show some kind of mastery of the subject or show us what she thinks about it. I hope that Trump has to do the same, because I'm voting based on foreign policy and I don't think I'm alone. I don't think it's just Arabs that are upset about what's happening. I think there's a lot of us that are upset. So I'm hoping to get some information about the worldview of both of these people from this interview. And I cannot think of a better person to get that out of them than Joe Rogan.
Well, I will bet anybody who will take the action that half of the runtime with Trump will be taken up with weed, who killed JFK, and aliens.
That is a distinct possibility.
So for everybody,
aliens in particular,
for everybody who's like, oh man, I don't know, I bet he's going to reveal the character in before it's half of. When are you going to reveal JFK? Or
yeah,
you know, when?
Or what do you know
aliens?
about the aliens?
What do you think about weed? Like it's going to be. Well, Joe, I'm glad you asked, because I'm here to tell you.
Didn't Trump try to unseal JFK stuff? Am I right in thinking that? Because there's stuff that's still sealed. And
he said he was going to, but you can't trust Trump's words. I do think as president of the United States, he probably has information about aliens that maybe he'll drop some. So, like I said, I'm excited for this interview in a lot of different ways, and aliens is absolutely one of them.
I would love it if they aired it live. I think if they aired it live, it might be television primetime level numbers.
Yeah. They're not going to do that.
That would hurt the downloads. And that ultimately is the way that Spotify makes money, is by putting the ads into the, dynamically into the podcast. But, that'd be interesting. I'd be very curious.
Can't wait.
Do you think Kamala will do it?
I think that she's so calculating that she will not agree or disagree until she sees how it goes for Trump.
Well, yeah, the rumor was that she would do it the next day.
I certainly hope so. I think she needs it, man. I think
she needs it more than he does.
Absolutely, she does. And I think that Joe would be kind to her, because he's also, like Andrew correctly pointed out, he voted for Bernie in 2016, for Christ's sake. So he's someone that would be open to her ideas, but we don't know what they are.
Do you think he'd play the Michael Malice clip?
I don't know what that is.
Have you not seen it? Michael Malice on Joe Rogan talking about how Kamala is America's wine mom, and going through all the phases of Kamala Harris, that she's either super excited of like, oh, yay, I got a buzz, or she's a little bit too drunk before noon, but she speaks in very direct things so you cannot tell how drunk she is. It's very, very
I haven't
funny.
seen it.
Anyway.
But I guess as someone who's watched Kamala in off C-SPAN hearings, I do think that she would get a bump just from people getting to see her talk for 3 hours, because she is very intelligent when she gets in the zone and she's not doing that fake campaigny thing. She's kind of great. So I think it would be good for people to see that side of her, to see how smart she is, to see her mastery of certain subjects. And like I said, I have questions about how she sees certain world events. So I think it would be good for her, because there are so many questions. She just seems so fake. And another person who seemed so fake was Hillary, and we all know what happened to her. So
whatever did happen to her?
She's wandering in the woods forever.
Some say you can hear Fight Song on this very night. On a cold, autumnal evening.
Yeah.
I think that Kamala should do it. It would be in her best interest to do it. And I think in general candidates will benefit from this kind of thing, because a significant amount of the political process that we have now is, rather than going after ideas, going after the person and trying to communicate to the masses that this person is evil incarnate. They are a subhuman. And even if it's somebody with whom I have serious character concerns about, like Donald Trump, after you listen to them for an hour, they cease being an alien entity that you read about, and they become a real person, and therefore they become more comfortable to you. So I suspect that both of them will actually do pretty well on it. But I agree, unless it goes completely off the rails, I think it would be of more benefit to Kamala Harris, particularly given that I find that my my friends that are Democratic that are going to vote for Kamala Harris can articulate very specific reasons that they think, one, Trump would be bad, and two, that she would be very good. I find that when I talk to people that are independents, libertarians, moderates, what I hear from them pretty consistently is, I can't tell if Kamala Harris is a super progressive who is pretending to be a centrist for 8 minutes till she gets elected, or if she doesn't have anything to begin with, or if she's made a choice. I think her just being able to let us know how her mind thinks and how she approaches things would actually be very useful to people.
Leon, it snuffs out some of the exaggerations, right? Like Justin pointed out that J.D. Vance went on Theo Vaughn's podcast and behaved like a normal human being, as I have seen him do in the Senate. Like, my familiarity with J.D. Vance before he became the nominee was he was in charge of the investigations into the East Palestine, Ohio train explosion, and he was excellent. So, like, the exaggerations, they're annoying and they're lies, and I think that those get exposed best in this type of format.
Yes. And I hope that everybody does it more. And I think that, I don't know whether or not it's going to cost them the election or they're going to pay any political price for it, but I do believe that in our current meta, the Democrats are a lot more stingy about message management than the Republicans are.
Yeah.
Especially the post-Trump Republicans, where they just kind of assume, all right, people are going to hate us no matter what. Let's just get out to as many places as you can and then go from there. Where the Democrats even, it took Kamala 2.5 months to do an MSNBC interview with Stephanie Ruhle, which is like about as kid gloves as you're going to get.
She's basically a fluffer.
I mean, at every interview that she did when she started doing them, we're like giving her multiple choice answers in their questions of like, Kamala, you've changed a lot of your opinions. Did you A, change your opinions after you became president? B, have had an evolving thought personally? Or C, all of the above? Please, go ahead. I hope that they lean more toward the Liz Smith, Mayor Pete model, which is don't be afraid to go answer tough questions, because when, if let's say, Kamala loses and you do have this race to see who the new power in the Democratic Party is, you're going to see Mayor Pete on Fox News a lot. And he's going to be pitching himself as, hey, I can be a bipartisan person. Look, you know me. I've been on your television. I've answered the questions from Brett Baer, and I didn't leave pretending that he was Bill O'Reilly or Sean Hannity. Like, I don't know. I hope so. I hope they do it. Patreon.com/We're Not Wrong is where you need to go. This week, we're going to be talking about Rudy Giuliani losing his apartment, watches, and signed Joe DiMaggio jerseys to pay for his defamation case. Just head on over there right now. Patreon.com/We're Not Wrong. There's no apostrophe in We're Not Wrong. A study has found the reason why we doom scroll, feelings of existential uncertainty driven by crises like climate change and political polarization, are tied to brain activity, particularly in the amygdala, which triggers stress hormones. Chronic stress can impair the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, affecting decision-making and reinforcing anxiety. People often cope by seeking information, which leads to doom scrolling and susceptibility to conspiracy theories, therefore reinforcing this negative trend. Mr. Andrew Eaton, you just wrote a book on tribalism, which deals with a lot of the physical and societal ramifications of stuff like this. Do you believe that doom scrolling is killing us?
No, this was a weird article to read because I agreed with all of the aggregated points in it and didn't agree with the conclusion of it itself. It's a weird study in that there's no data in it for a study. The thing, at least the piece that I was reading that you sent me, Justin, at no point did they poll anybody, nor did they compare it to any groups. I would have liked to have seen them. The thesis to it was people are stressed because of the time that we live in and all of the things involved in that, and therefore they doom scroll. That was the thesis to it. And so what would have been pretty easy to do in my mind would be pick a country that you think is not stressful and go check their social media habits, go check their Twitter habits, their doom scrolling habits. My guess is you will find that they spend a lot of time on their phone. Like if we pick, I don't know, the Netherlands or Sweden or something, my guess is they also spend a lot of time on their phone. I think that they're putting the cart before the horse, in that our phones are designed to spurt little bursts of dopamine in our brains. I put my phone on grayscale half the time because I'll just, every time I get on an escalator, an elevator, the line at the grocery store, anything involves the slightest amount of boredom in between activities, I'll pick up my phone and I put it on grayscale to remind myself, don't do this. And so I suspect that people are just going to fiddle on their phone because it is a constant spigot of reliable entertainment and distraction available to you. Stress probably exacerbates that, so I think that the author's probably correct insofar as that goes, but I don't think that you get rid of stress, you get rid of doom scrolling. Where I think that they've got a point that I very much agree with is, I think that when people are under duress, they do seek sustenance by being a part of something larger than them. When people are under stress, they're more likely to find comfort in religion or political movements or something. That's part of why at this point during the political cycle, we are at a point where you're going to find that your opinion may not have changed, but your friends no longer view you as being acceptable, even though you're not different. But it's because they're plugging into the group dynamic and they're getting stressed, and therefore things are altering based on that. So there were lots of things that I agreed with and on, but the overall takeaway, though, I didn't think that there was compelling evidence for the observations of neurology coupled with therefore we doom scroll.
Jen?
I disagree almost entirely.
Oh, batten down the hatches.
Basically just because this explained to me why I feel so bad when I doom scroll. And God knows I've been sucked into the doom scrolling quite a bit.
Let me. I realize that we did not describe it for those of you who might be puzzling as to what
boomers.
Doom scrolling means.
There's an explanation for the boomers.
Yeah, doom scrolling is when you just mindlessly are looking through whatever social media feed of your choice, like Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, and it doesn't really matter. There's no point to it. You just kind of keep going and going and going, as if the next thing that you might happen to discover is going to answer the reason why you got on the phone in the first place.
Yeah. And one of the reasons that I do the scrolling is, like, I do seek out information when I feel out of control. And one thing that you said, Andrew, is that you'd be curious if they went to other countries where they also doom scroll, because we're all on our phones. But I think one of the differences they might find is, I'm guessing in countries where people feel a little bit happier, they probably feel like their government is responsive to them. Because I know a lot of my own doom scrolling and where I get frustrated is that we have a lot of TikToks and Reels and those types of content that are exposing problems. In fact, my podcast is a really good example of this. It's exposing all kinds of problems, and I don't know what the hell to do about it because my government is not responsive to me. And so just seeing how they described why people go to the internet for looking for information to try and alleviate stress and how it causes more stress, like, I can actually feel myself feeling worse the longer I'm on my phone or on Twitter. And I've actually had to take myself away from it on purpose this year because I've been working on not going insane. And one of the things that I've had to do is put the phone down at least an hour before I go to bed. If I wake up in the middle of the night, which I have been doing a lot lately, I cannot pick up my phone because I doom scroll and I just stay up even longer. I am now very well aware that the doom scrolling is bad for me and that it's affecting my mental health in a negative way. And so for this article to come out and just talk about what's being triggered in the brain and how it triggers the stress hormones and all that, it made perfect sense to me. So I understand that this wasn't a study. I don't know that it was meant to be one, but the explanation that they had for why this feeling that I'm having is happening, it made perfect sense to me.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of the mechanics. I think all of the neurology that was discussed in there, all of the hormones, talking about cortisol, I think that's all true. And doom scrolling will not make you happier. Like I don't think doom scrolling is a good idea. I'm not mitigating in favor of doom scrolling. Really, my thing is just I suspect that people are going to spend a lot of time on their phone even if they're doing well. because that's what phones are designed to do. So I don't know that it would the predominant factor would be the stress. The other thing that I would be really curious about, again, I'm fascinated with scaling. Like, I think that that's something that's really, really understudied in society. And I'd be curious to see what it's like in terms of the media environment that we swim in versus Europe. So, like, if you're doing, if something bad happens in America, everybody in America can know about it in 20 seconds. We've got 330 people that are all part of the same pot. Whereas if you're in the Netherlands, you do have BBC, you have stuff like that, but probably you're watching local Dutch news, which is going to be 7 million people, and the likelihood that something bad happened in a group of 7 million people on a given day is a lot less than 330 million people. So this is just me thinking out loud, by the way, not even really contesting the article. I wonder if we are not overly stressed in terms of informational glut by virtue of being in such a large country and such a large media market, whereas if you're from a smaller country, you're just less likely to encounter all the bad stuff happening on the continent on a regular basis.
I also wonder in some of this whether or not we are just in an awkward adolescence with access to this level of information, and we need to give ourselves some grace on whether or not we are our liability and being able to affect it. I know a few people in my life, and I'll tell a story of one of them, and I know that she's a listener. She's a huge Jen fan and is actually going to come visit in a few weeks, and she is very excited to meet you.
Oh, awesome.
But she was somebody politically that was incredibly active. When I describe like the volunteer surrogate level of posting everywhere that you can post, fighting in every comment section for her political point of view, that was her. Very much dialed in. Very distraught when Trump won in 2016, heartbroken, crestfallen, and then elated when Trump loses in 2020. And intervening between that election and this election, she had a tremendous personal tragedy. Her husband died suddenly, and her entire world kind of came crashing down around her. At which point, she realized that her own decisions in the voting booth are going to be her decisions in the voting booth. She can make that, vote how she wants, but she didn't need to put herself in the situation where she had to be a volunteer surrogate because the juice was not worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
And working yourself up to the point where you believe if you don't every single time advance the line of whatever you believe in, and you are actively deteriorating some of your personal relationships and certainly deteriorating your own life for the cause of whatever it be it something I think is very manipulative like politics or even larger social causes. If you're not going to go out and do something about it, and you're not going to go affect certain change beyond just posting about it online, then you can at the very least save yourself from deteriorating your own mental state for it. And I think that there's a lot of people right now who are going through the most intense portion of that, obviously, because we are in an electoral cycle that is nearing the very end. And so people are reconciling with that. But I would just hope that when it comes to doom scrolling, if you feel helpless in something, look to philosophy before you look to Twitter. Like, look to what it means to be a part of the unknown, what it means to be a speck of dust in a gigantic cosmic tornado, and what you can do in that world before you beat yourself up because you are going to search through these dopamine factories to see whether or not you can actually find the one little bit of data that's either going to make it make sense to you or make it make sense to the rest of the world that you want to go out there and proselytize.
Justin, I'm very much in agreement with you on this. I do think we're in a growing pain period with technology, and a lot of what we're going through is just society and individuals have not caught up with the new landscape that we're a part of. The gatekeepers are dead. By and large, I think that's a positive thing, that there's not 12 white dudes that went to one of 5 colleges that can control the entire media narrative in the country. I think that's a very positive development. The downside to it is that the Overton window's been blasted to shit, and there's not a agreement that comes from on high down through every other media platform of what reality is. We've lost that. It's now up for grabs. Reality is totally up for grabs, and that's a scary feeling. And it means that there's everybody participating. I think that's part of why people are becoming more partisan is logically people go, I can't dedicate 10 hours a day to figuring out what's true. I'm being inundated by more information that's ever existed in all of human history. I think it's like one day now is the amount of information that was published the entire year I was born. And that's just in my lifetime that's gone that high. So people very naturally go, well, I'm just going to default on the party. I'm going to find a partisan outlet that I will trust to be the gatekeeper on my behalf, and they plug into that. And I'm very much taken with that perspective. That I think that this is a weird period where we have mediums that have gone much faster than our ability to cope with them. Something that is not mentioned in this particular piece, but I think would be germane to phones and email and things like that, is human beings, we've got pretty good hardware in us to go along to get along. Most people do not want to needlessly ruffle feathers or be dicks. Of course there are exceptions, but most people, when they're interacting with somebody across a table from them, wants to get along. The part of our brain that does that does not understand that a phone is a conduit to another person. In the same way that when I go on vacation and like somebody gives a phone to my dog, Wallace doesn't know that I'm on the other end. It's just a glass square. The part of your brain that handles censorship, it just thinks it's a glass square, which is part of why people are so vicious in online fights that would not be in regular day-to-day conversations. And we haven't quite figured out how to get around that and how to adapt to it yet.
I will say, when it comes to politics specifically, the big mission that I have with PX3, the hidden mission, I'm going to reveal it.
Whoa.
Is I desperately want to change the narrative that you owe a political party anything.
Yeah.
Political parties owe you everything. They need to tap dance for you. They need to deliver for you. If you feel beholden to them, then you are essentially squandering any and all ability for you to actually affect the change in the world, and you're just going to find yourself with homogenized gruel that they're going to force you to rubber stamp at the end of the day, because they have now emotionally invested in you in this very dark game of good guys and bad guys. If you believe, and that's partly why I focus so much on strategy and tactics, because I do think that you should be mad. You know, Tim Walz was on The Daily Show, and Jon Stewart asked him, hey, can we not with the Cheneys? And Tim Walz's answer was, well, you know, I think that she's going to help us do really, really well with libertarians. And it's like, well, okay. So no, you've actually made me less sure that you have any idea what the hell you're doing.
Yeah.
If that's your answer. And then, you know, he says, we're not going to be taking foreign policy advice from her. In another interview with NBC, Kamala Harris is asked, hey, do you believe that Liz Cheney would be in your cabinet? And Kamala Harris said, stay tuned.
Oh my God. Well, and so, you know,
it's like, look, be mad about it. If you think I've said I'm befuddled as to why they're hugging the Cheneys so close, right? Because I think strategically, I don't know what voters they're speaking to with that. And if Tim Walz thinks it's libertarians, I have bad news for him. But the focus on that. Be mad at your party for that. And it doesn't mean that you have to go out there and degrade the chances to win by yelling about it online. You can make a quiet decision in your heart. Either I'm going to vote for them or not vote for them, or I was going to go door knock because I very much believe in them. I was going to go do get out the vote with the people that are actually there to be had, not your group chat where you're just yelling at your friends and family and degrading your personal relationships for no reason. If you really care about getting out the vote, you can do it. There are volunteer organizations all over the country where you can advance the causes that you care about every single day, including right now. Every cause that you believe in would love to have you out there knocking on doors of people that data analytics wise are actually persuadable. If you don't want to do that because you don't believe in them, you shouldn't. They owe you everything. You don't owe them anything. And I think partly decoupling that is what I think can help us, you know, do a little bit less doom scrolling, because we are looking for why we are deficient. why we can do something better. If only I retweeted this one thing, if I only posted this one thing to stories, then this gigantic world event might be different. I don't think that, you are beholden to that, or you should ever feel bad about it.
So I agree with that, because I used to do that. There's some of the earlier episodes of Congressional Dish when Congress didn't get fired in mass. I got very, very upset because I'm like, why am I doing this podcast if nothing's going to fucking change? Like, I lost my mind. And so I think just by that experience, I've mellowed in that regard. But as someone who still turns to the internet every day, one of the reasons is, and this Cheney thing is a really good example, where here I am as someone who got into caring about government and politics because, in large part, I hate the Cheneys. Yeah. I think they are demons who have so much blood on their hands. Dick in particular, not necessarily Liz, but like, these are not people that when you say to me, I have the endorsement of Dick Cheney, that I think that you're going to bring peace to this world.
But libertarians love them. Libertarians are huge Cheney fans.
Right? It's like this, the thing that I agree with all libertarians. Dave Smith and I will talk all day about how we are anti-war. It's like the tone deafness of that. And so for me to go to the internet, a lot of times I'm just looking for, am I insane? Yeah. Or are there other people like me out there? And so when I do see the person screaming into their phone being like, Dick fucking Cheney, like, that makes me feel better. It makes me feel sane that I'm not the only one who's looking at this and going, what planet am I on? And so I am looking a lot of times for camaraderie in the doom scroll. And I think sometimes it does help until I do it too long.
So that's the thing. I think digital tribes are incredibly important. I think that digital tribes are something that are the reason why I tend to push back against that fraud Putnam and his bowling alone nonsense. Bowling alone. Is that I do believe that the internet and mass media has given us more of the opportunity to stretch beyond our geographical boundaries and find, if there's nobody in Austin, although there's probably a fair amount of people in Austin that would agree with you, but let's say that you didn't. Let's say that you, Joe Green Acres your ass and moved you out to Montana or something like that. Your ability to find a digital community to say, what the fuck with the Cheneys would be very meaningfully helpful. Now, I do think that's different than just the doom scrolling, which is, I swear to God, the answer to all of my problems are in the next 3 finger flicks. Like, oops, I didn't find it. I guess I'm deficient. I
think that there's, I'm very opposed to political social media. There are benefits to it. There are no doubt that there are benefits to it, but I find that just so often it's creating this cocktail of bad neurochemicals, like alluded to in the article. And this, to me, goes a ways back. When I was working for Congress and I was a staffer, I would get just screamed at, top of the lungs screamed at for hours over the across the day. And it was always the same demographic. It was retired guys that were very frustrated. And I eventually got to the point where I went, oh, they're not actually calling because they've got a political problem. They're calling because they have a life problem, and they've figured out that this is an acceptable way to vent their frustrations, that they can call and yell at an intern in a congressional office in a way that they cannot do at a Starbucks, and they've figured this out. And I see a lot of that online, and it's beguiling in that when you get angry and you're arguing with people on the internet, speaking specifically about arguing here, where you're fighting strangers on Twitter, when you're arguing, you do get bits of dopamine, you do get adrenaline, it's an energizing experience, but you also get that cortisol, which has a really long half-life. Like if you've ever woken up in the middle of the night from a hangover, that is because cortisol lasts longer than dopamine, and the stress chemical that is making you sweat is still active in you after all the fun chemicals have gone. And I think that online rage works very similar, where you get some of the nice bits, the dopamine, some of the adrenaline, as I said, but then the stress sticks around. And I think people do a great disservice to them in terms of it. And so I like the camaraderie. I like the online tribes. I've got a Discord too. I'm all in favor of that. It's more of like just when I see people arguing with strangers on Twitter, it's so rare that there's any benefit to it. I know maybe 5 people for whom they've used social media as an actual mechanism in their career. For everybody else, I'm like, it would be better to go walk your dog or learn guitar,
I don't know.
Or learn messages.
I don't know about that, because I think that we all have these political opinions that we want to get out. And yet to bring it up in your day-to-day life just makes things awkward. Like I see the same people every morning now that I'm doing these volleyball trainings, 20 to 30 people that I do not talk to about politics. They do not know what I do. That would not be the venue for me to be like, fucking Dick Cheney, eh? Yeah. Like that's just not the place for that. And so where I do that, I've made a whole career out of doing that. So it's like, am I fighting with individuals on Twitter? No, not anymore. But I have this outlet now where I talk to thousands of people. We're just doing it, the three of us, in different ways. But when someone who doesn't have the podcast like we have, when they are going on Twitter to have these conversations, they're then able to go and sit at the kitchen table with their kids and be like, okay, tell me your boring story about your soccer practice, and like not be screaming about Dick Cheney.
Like a release valve.
Absolutely, it's a release valve.
It is part of a balanced breakfast.
Yeah.
You can overdo it. You can, but I do think that it is helpful. I will say to Heaton's point, yes, fighting with strangers on the internet, bad idea.
Yeah. But we all have to learn it the hard way.
If you find yourself replying to a famous person or a politician more than once a year, you have a problem. You're just a dog that barks at the UPS truck that drives outside of your house. It's a bad move. What I would say I find more troubling is internally, your group chats, your friends, your family, when you are talking to people that you know on Facebook and you're screaming and yelling and going through these gigantic essay length comments. That is, to me, where it becomes very, very toxic. And it also opens you up to assholes like me in my group chat in Florida, where I just do nothing but inflame the personal political opinions of my friends until they fight for my amusement, because I'm deficient and I am taking it out on others. So
you've made a whole career out of it. So.
Don't be taking advantage. Oh yeah, no, yeah. It does not end with this show. I keep sharp.
I know.
I keep sharp in the off season.
Something to add to.
I'm like the Tom Brady of assholes. Like I'm working on TB12 24/7.
We've hung out with you outside the show. We know your games.
Something to add real quick is, if you do find yourself replying to celebrities and politicians all the time, they are using you in order to extend their footprint. I've spoken to people that work in political media, and the name of the game is get the other team to pile on you. That's what they're doing. They're picking fights, and they're trying to piss you off so that you reply to them, because it drives their profile up. And so if you want to help the people you hate, argue with them online, because that is literally what they are doing with you. And I don't want to participate in it.
Yeah, there were people, I forget which medium it was. It might have been Vice, but it was as Vice got more liberal, there was somebody's job to be friendly with Milo Yiannopoulos of Breitbart. That tells you what era I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
To say, hey, please dunk on this story. Please call this story ridiculous, because that drives up the engagement that they need on the actual metrics that they care about. Like this is look, there's stuff happening behind the scenes.
Like I said, I've been working on this year. Here's a few of the rules that I've given myself, because I obviously have to be online for my job. I want to be informed. I do want to feel better about the stuff that I'm screaming about in my head and want to know if there's other people. So what I do is, when I wake up in the morning, no social media for an hour. I let myself just wake up, be a person, appreciate the sunrise, pet my dog, an hour. Then in the middle of the day, if I'm doing the scrolly thing, I try and keep it to 30-minute increments. And the minute I see I've gone over 30 minutes, I'm like, okay, now I know I'm doing something bad for myself. And like I said, an hour before bed. But I think time limits are the best way to make sure. Time. Yeah, I mean, seriously, but it's been incredibly helpful for me this year to find that balance.
This process.
Yeah, to find this balance between being informed about the worst shit I've ever seen in my entire life, and also taking myself out of it so that it doesn't destroy me.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's the only thing I've come up with, but because it's working, maybe it'll work for you too.
Because it's easy to happen. It's easy to do it. We're not wrong pod at gmail.com. Pull it up, Jamie. We're not wrong pod at gmail.com. Jen. Well, this is an email to Jen. I just wanted to pop a message out there to say to Jen, you've done more to convince me that moving away from fossil fuels is possible than any other source. I appreciate you and your passion for preserving human life. I'm similarly driven when making my own voting decisions, that I learn something new every time that you go on a rant.
Thank you. I love that. It makes me feel like this career isn't completely useless when I get emails like that.
Yes. Thank you, Wrights. Thank you for helping me understand politics. Trying to get into politics in 2016 was a headache since I didn't know anything, and I just listened to other people without forming my own opinions or being afraid to form my own opinion. That went on into the 2020 election with all the horribleness that went into that. But in the past year, your smart and thorough debates have helped explain things that are going on in a very helpful and less stressed way. Also, your individual shows are fantastic. A word I don't use a lot, but I know fits this email.
Thank you.
Progressives can't take a win, writes. I was an intelligence analyst for the DEA for several years, working on the Special Operations and Counter Threat Finance, all while being an anti-drug war libertarian. But a few trips to D.C. and New York City have completely changed my mind on legal pot. Ban it again. I hate the smell. Kids shouldn't be subjected to the smell. And the overall decriminalization of possession and use in progressive areas has been an unmitigated disaster. Yes, I still recognize all the terrible consequences of the drug war. Yes, I recognize that it has been local decriminalization and not federal legalization, which have been different consequences. I don't care. I hate the smell. Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore had it right. Cane them.
My God. I hate the smell of cigarettes and cigars and burning fossil fuels and farts, but you can't just ban smells. Like, get over it. Spook.
It is a thing.
I know. And it's so funny. It's like, do you run around killing skunks because you hate the same exact smell? Like, sometimes there's just a smell. Walk somewhere else. Like, you can't control this.
Fake restaurant. That was one of our stories last week. The Shed. I keep thinking about this 7-year-old boy, a story from Vice, while you guys were talking about the fake restaurant story. A guy with Vice did the exact same thing in London. He made The Shed the #1 restaurant in London on TripAdvisor and went a step further by actually doing a single night as a restaurant in his tiny garden.
That's amazing.
Of his flat, which is what British people call an apartment. This is a thing, and I'm surprised that it has not been done more, honestly, seeing as this guy showed everybody exactly how to do it.
That's really cool. I mean, you can make a business out of anything, I guess. That's pretty cute.
And Heaton dropped off, so he will not be able to plug the political orphanage, but I know, because I saw in my feed, that, as he mentioned earlier, he has 2 big pitches, one from people for Kamala Harris and one for people for Trump. So if you are curious how that enchanted hat rack of a man sees these 2 pitches, then please download those 2 episodes of The Political Orphanage.
Well, and I'll also make a little plug for his book. In particular, have bought the audio version of it on Audible because Andrew Heaton performs it himself.
Yep.
And he's a funny motherfucker, so I'm pretty sure it's going to be excellent. So yeah, go and support our friend. But also, I think it's going to be a great book.
And leave a review.
Yes.
Leave a review.
5 stars. Don't be a dick.
5 stars. Yeah, don't do 4, like, oh, I don't know. No, 5. Give him 5. Give the old boy 5. On PX3 this week, we have the nicest man in politics, Howard Mortman, back on the show. So we can talk. I stumped him in political trivia, by the way.
Howard?
I stumped Howard.
Stop it.
I stumped him on what was Al Gore's Halloween costume in the 2000 election.
I mean, I wouldn't know that.
Of course you wouldn't, but you're not a hyper nerd like me and Howard.
True. What was the Halloween costume?
Underdog.
Oh, God, what a nerd. No wonder he lost.
So we have Howard Mortman and Kirk Beto of Hotline, the National Journal outlet. We talked more about the Cheney thing, actually. We wound up talking a lot about why, because Kamala Harris is back out on the trail with her this week.
She thinks it's a winner. I don't understand it.
3 different events with Liz Cheney. They believe that there is a meaningful audience, that they're going to win this election.
By fucking over their own base.
Well,
Great
and
plan.
That's the thing that I got into with Kirk is, like, number one, I don't know who the Never Trumpers are they're talking to.
Yeah.
Because I can name like 5 other Never Trump voices that would be better if she were out on the trail or doing their podcast. They all have successful podcasts. Why hasn't she not done a Dispatch podcast? Why has she not done a Bulwark podcast? If she meaningfully believes that these are the people that will turn this election, there are media outlets that are begging begging. All they would want to do is talk to her about January 6th. I promise you.
Yeah.
That's all they would do is just, if you want that actual hour-long conversation that does nothing but talk about the Eastman memo while Kamala Harris nods along and says, yes, very concerning. There are outlets that does it, that do that, and she is not doing them. Instead, she's bringing Liz Cheney around so they can talk about Liz Cheney things. It befuddles the gerbs. Because not only do I not know who the never Trump voices are that she is going after, I also know that there are, leftists and liberals that are trying to hold their nose, trying to get that clothespin.
I know.
And boy, does it get harder and harder to do the more she talks about the distinguished history of leadership of Dick Cheney.
Yeah.
Because
promising the most lethal military and, giving us not even a shred of hope that she's going to do something different in Gaza and now Lebanon. Like it's
at all.
We're looking for anything, and she's going in the opposite direction. So I had a friend call me because he was just like, do you think Trump's going to win this? And I'm like, I honestly do, because she's running away from her own base. I don't understand it. So
I
don't know.
I am.
Election night's going to be something.
And by the way, we are going to do election night again.
Yes.
We are doing election night.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Is it going to be, how do people find that? Because
that'll be on my everywhere that I broadcast video. So it'll be on my Twitch, it'll be on my YouTube, it'll be on my X. It'll just be available to everybody. But we're going to be going, and I've gotten sign off from the wife. We're going late.
Okay, good. That'll be
late.
fun.
Yeah,
because I did plug it at the end of my Congressional Dish episode, but I was like, I don't even know where this is going to be. So I just guessed Twitch and YouTube. So I'm glad to hear that I was not wrong.
Yes. No, you were right. You were absolutely correct.
And speaking of my Congressional Dish episode, it is dropping probably right now. But I listened to it last night. It's not boring. So I kind of tell you the broad overview of our current immigration system. And then I look at the Republican bill. And then I look at the bill that Kamala is promising to bring back on immigration. Because the specifics of what they're talking about are very, very different. And so I think it's a really good episode. I wish I had finished it sooner. I didn't realize that early voting now is a huge thing.
We are already into, I think, day 9 in some states.
I didn't think it was more than 2 weeks.
1/5 of the votes in Nevada that were in the last presidential election have already been cast. And,
I feel terrible that I didn't get this
not
done in time.
Not great news for the Democrats.
Oh, really?
According to John Ralston, who is like the only person that anyone trusts. There's one man in the country that anyone trusts to actually like count votes and tell you what is happening in Nevada. It's this one dude, John Ralston, who is not, he leans left. He's not shy about his opinions on certain Republican candidates.
Oh, boy.
Not great. I think Republicans actually lead early voting in Nevada.
There's so much confusion. Like, depending on who you read, Kamala's ahead and then Trump's ahead, and it's just like
I will say
bullshit.
in general, counting early voting is like betting on preseason football. Like it is a bad idea. You often get mixed up. That being said, anything John Ralston says, I believe him, and he is. Yeah, read him. Nevada Independent, John Ralston's live early voting blog.
If you haven't voted yet, or you're voting on actual election day, like me and I think most people, I hope still, right? Yeah. This should help you vote, because I picked 2 bills, versions of them where you can actually look at the votes too.
All right, we have confirmation that Heaton Starlink was not charged, and so he is trying to figure out exactly how to get back online.
It was eaten by an alpaca.
Until next time, friends. Our editor is Will Saddleberg, usually, although he's in Hawaii right now.
Aloha, Will.
Yeah. Well, he's not going to hear it. He's,
he better fucking listen to us on his vacation.
We're Not Wrong is a production of Dog and Pony Show Audio. Until next time, for Andrew Heaton and Jen Briney, I'm Justin Robert Young, and we're not wrong.
And neither are you.